And we're live. Welcome back, guys. Welcome to the New Cow Corner. Today I have a special guest for you. We're going to talk about some super special animals. Without any further ado, let me introduce Tony of Roc Geckos. Thanks for coming on, Tony. Again, I appreciate this so much. This is a complete honor and privilege to get to tap someone's brain that's worked with animals and does, works with animals that you do. Real
Thanks
quick,
for
can
having
you
me.
introduce yourself, maybe some of the species you work with, how you got into this?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Tony. I started Roc Geckos, probably going on close to 20 years ago now.
Ooh,
Yeah, I've been working with herbs for a long time. I started out when I used to live in South Florida, catching anoles and house geckos and tree frogs, and just kind of exploded from there. I have a little bit of gecko ADD, but there's couple types that usually fit the permanent roster. Obviously, a lot of New Caledonian stuff, but then some Madagascar species, bunch of Australian geckos, and then a couple of odds and ends mixed in there too.
that's amazing. It's amazing. Guys, if you haven't checked out Tony's YouTube page or your Instagram page and you want to see some amazing animals, check out Roc Geckos, right? Is it Roc_Geckos?
Correct.
Check
Yeah.
check his page out. You'll feel like you're scrolling through National Geographic or something.
You want to
So
know the absolute worst part about that, though? I got to stop you. So I'm over here in Rochester, New York, and we've got this great reptile expo, Rexpo, that we do. One of my friends and mentors here that has taught me a lot about a lot of the geckos that I've bought from him over the years is Tom Wood of Secret Laboratory Geckos.
oh,
Awesome guy, but as good as I am, I'm always at best going to be the number 2 gecko guy in Rochester. So
yeah, he's doing some incredible things. All right, so you do have a lot of species, but today, unfortunately for me, maybe some of you viewers, we're not going to have the time to talk about all of them. But I would like to talk about and focus on a super rare, super elusive animal that there's not much known about in the hobby. I mean, and the price tag does it, but rough snouts, right?
yeah.
There, people love New Caledonian geckos. Everyone goes crazy about them. I have over 200 myself. But these rough snouts here, they're like the myth of New Caledonia, if you will. So how did you wind up falling into these?
It's one of those things. I always try to diversify my collection. You see a lot of people that go heavy into one species, and there's, you find your favorite, you find your group, and kind of stick with it. I've always been a diversify. I do a lot of expos and like to have a variety because it brings people into the table. But also, hey, if one market is saturated, I've got another couple of things, and so
Brilliant.
for a while was doing really, really well with some gecko sales and said, you know what, I found an opportunity to get into Drachycephalus, the lesser rough snouts. So buddy of mine, real good friend out in San Diego, Kevin Cantrell, again, another really close friend and mentor slash supplier, had a pair that he got from Tremper a couple years ago, Phil Tremper. Finally had luck getting a litter and then sent one my way for the buddy deal. And then I was like, all right, now I got to find a couple more. So,
Beautiful
yeah.
animals. So which ones, and I don't know much about them due to the lack of information out there. I know there's two species, right? The graders and the lessers.
Correct.
What are some of the differences between the two?
And it's funny because I've been trying to kind of photo catalog that a little bit as I keep these guys, and I I bought them as babies. So the fun part about that is you get to see them mature and develop, and you kind of get an idea of, the neonate behavior versus the adult behavior. So I've got my graders, my Trechyrhynchus, that are still maturing right now. They're probably about 2.5 years old. What I found with the lessers is they tend to obviously be a little bit smaller in size, like the name implies. A little bit more flighty, and maybe at times a little bit more defensive.
Okay.
So at least that's been my experience so far. Now the big difference that why I kind of referenced, hey, I got them as babies, and my
Yeah.
graders are not quite fully mature yet. So some of the defensive behavior I've seen from females and even my males have been maybe because they're mature, right? Maybe
Hmm.
because they've been kept in breeding pairs, and so that you're seeing a little bit of a different
Hmm.
behavior. And I haven't quite seen that for my graders yet. But from what I've talked to other folks about, it seems like the graders just are a little bit less flighty, skittish. That's certainly been my experience, and they're really intelligent animals too, just
Interesting.
both species.
I hear people compare them to, I'm a super huge fan of Chihuahuas. Like they're my animal. I love them. And I've heard people say, and I think they're super intelligent, but
Mhm.
I've heard people compare the two. What do you know anything about this species in the wild? Like what part of the forest they occupy, what they're doing out there? Do you have any information? Is there any information on these animals in
Yeah,
the wild?
I've got a couple of books and articles that I've read and chatted with a few folks. I believe that primarily they're found in kind of the same area as Chihuahua. You have some
Really?
that are on the mainland in Grand Terre, and then you have a couple on the Isles of Pines. I believe though the Trachycephalids, they're really only that one island. Like their range is extremely reduced in the wild, and they're one of the rarest geckos in the wild. There's actually
Mm.
probably more Trachycephalus in captivity than Trachyrhynchus, but that's
I think
probably more to
someone
do
was
with the
telling
price
me
tag.
they were like actually listed as endangered or something in the
Mhm.
wild. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, very reduced range, and then you've got obviously the introduced animals there that are kind of wreaking havoc on their population. The ants and the rodents and things like that. So unfortunately, I think that's hurt that island population a little bit more than a lot of other species.
Being that there probably is more animals in captivity, do you think there's any chance in the future that maybe some guys working with them get some type of reintroduction program going on? Is there any chance of that or anything, being that they're so rare or even endangered?
Probably not. I think, that we're probably going back 20, 30 years ago when the original the animals were taken from New Caledonia. And by then it was, limited quantity. So there was kind of I'm sure you saw this too. There was a surge in some new blood of some other New Caledonian animals that started showing up probably, 5+ years ago. But I don't think any of those were among that. So I
Interesting.
tend to bet that government is getting pretty protective of those
I
animals.
bet. I bet. Only reason I ask is just because
Hmm.
I was not too long ago, I was reading something about some frogs. Some viruses ran through
Oh yeah.
amphibians and in South America, and there was a lot of people in captivity that were working with. I can't remember what species they were, but
T-
Terrabellus or something, and I don't know. But there was a region where only these one frogs come from, and there was like so many more in captivity than there was in the wild. So a bunch of people got together
mhm.
and contacted the government down there, and they set up some program, and they were going to start reintroducing some. And God only knows. I mean, I hear a lot of people in the hobby will do a lot of talking about how they keep certain species for conservation, and
Mhm.
in case this happens or that happens. But and please don't take this offensive because I'm not implying
Yeah,
to you or
absolutely.
saying to you, but when I ask people, like, so what are the plans? Like, what happens if they go completely out? What are you guys doing? How you get them in the wild? Nobody knows. With the blue tree
Mhm.
monitors, with the frogs, with all these animals that are endangered, we have we have them, and I guess I don't know if we necessarily have the means to get them back in the wild because if they're disappearing now, what's to stop them from going anywhere if we put 100 more back in the wild, right? Like they're
Sure, but you never know because I
slowly
mean, look at
disappearing.
crested geckos. They thought those were extinct too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely,
But I
absolutely.
think I think a lot of times, and I don't want to speak for everybody, obviously, but when you talk about like conservation, what that means to me is, we may not have access from those animals in the wild, even if they still exist, right? So, I mean, take a look at Australia and Australian herps for an example. There's never been legal export from Australia. Obviously, we've got plenty of herps that got here somehow, but a lot of folks used to get their animals imported from Germany and Europe, and that really isn't available anymore. So, I mean, if you want Australian geckos, you better hope that it's here because otherwise you're not going to see those again. So, I mean, when we talk about Trachycephalus and Trachyrhynchus, again, those actually, now that I'm thinking about it, if they're CITES, they may have some restrictions as well. But yeah, you're pretty much working. We've got with what we've gotten, so you just have to hope
Mhm.
people are continuing to breed them. successfully.
How has that affected? I'd imagine this is a super small community that you're involved in with these animals. Have you guys run into any issues with? I don't know if you would necessarily call it inbreeding, but how has the whole breeding circuit been working? Are you guys? Is there enough diversity to continue this species in captivity forever? Or
I wish I had a better answer, but I don't know. I mean, the truth is that there were probably very few animals that were, even brought in. And when you take a look at um, the productivity of these animals, the fertility, like you're lucky if you get one or two babies a year, but that's it. This is not like, other species where you may have, you know, 6, 10, 12 plus, in a given season. So one of the things that makes these animals so rare, aside from the price tag, is, and this is kind of tricky. Like I thought, hey, this would be easier with live bearing geckos, right?
yeah,
But no, mom and dad are looking for a snack. So if you don't catch them in the first
really?
day or two, you run the risk of, hey, that whole season you got nothing. You got skunked.
Wow. See, I would have thought the complete opposite. So let's get into that then.
Sure.
How are you keeping them? Let's start with that. How do you keep your animals?
Yeah, so I've got a pair in, geez, I should have probably checked out the dimensions, but they're probably about the equivalent of an 18-18-24, but with a little
Okay.
bit more depth because I've got a couple of PVC enclosures. I've got cork rounds, and then I don't know if you've ever seen these bamboo tubes with a hole cut in the side of them, and then
Uh-huh.
there's a swivel top.
No,
So,
absolutely.
I've seen that not only do these geckos like to sleep in those bamboo over the cork rounds, but that's typically where the female is going to nest.
Okay.
Right. So, when I start seeing that she's spending a little bit more time in there, especially when she's out basking, because, that's one of the other major differences. The Trachycephalids really don't seem to go out in the open and bask. I've seen migrators do that plenty. Um, but
Interesting.
once you see them out basking and thermoregulating and
Mhm.
getting a little bit plump, that's when we try to separate the males, give the
Okay.
female a little room because she's less likely to go after her kids in the first day or two.
Okay. Are you doing anything now? These are just, like so new to me. I don't even know like what type of questions to really ask. Is there any like birth steps you take as far as nutrition? Are you giving any type of like my chihuahuas? I would give extra calcium or you know extra meals if she'll eat before she lays. But is there anything you give these animals to prime them for breeding or reproduction?
Nothing I do too special, just as far as general husbandry and feeding goes, I try to offer a varied diet. So yeah, there's the MRP for sure. Try not to give them too much of any one kind, and then making sure that there's insects built in there and a variety of those, right? So
Yeah,
roaches,
absolutely,
crickets, hornworms, just a variety.
absolutely. What do the parameters look like? Just every the temp parameters, every other new cow species. What are
Yeah,
you
but I'll
shooting for?
I'll tell you, and I think this is true of any of the true Rhacodactylus, but Chihuahua too. That basking and that hot spot makes a big difference.
Yeah, yeah.
Whether they're coming out in the open and basking, or whether they're going to pick the warmest part of the cork tube or bamboo tube that's getting that heat. That's so important. I think with these New Caledonians that are so temperate, right? People have gotten used to keeping them room temperature, not providing basking lights. They bask. They absolutely do.
Absolutely. Tony, I'm looking at 12 cages right now, 18 by
Mhm.
18 by 24s. I can count seven that I can see Chihuahuas flat out basking right now. Like
Mhm.
on their perches, right under the lights basking right now. It's when people say that to me, I'm like, you're not, they mean well, but I'm like, you're
Mhm.
not really helping your animals, man. Like they want the heat. You don't have to heat the whole enclosure. We're not talking about make
Yeah,
the whole thing 90 degrees. We're it's not what I'm saying, but you need to give them an option. They need access to light and warmth. Just because
definitely.
room temperature is great for you and you like it, they tolerate it. There's nothing telling you that they like that. They
Mhm.
can tolerate it. It's
Well,
It's always interesting when I hear these things.
you start getting into husbandry sort of philosophy discussions, right?
Mm,
So yeah, you really don't want to put your New Caledonian gecko in an easy bake oven, but I think with
no.
people keeping a lot of animals, they try to go efficient. And so the problem with that is, yeah, it can live in a smaller tank, but if you give them more vertical space, basking room, different temperature zones, you're going to see totally different behavior out of folks. I think I started keeping Leachianus. That was a big surprise too, because
Mhm.
babies you got to keep in pretty cramped conditions, but
Mhm.
the adults, man, they'll use all that space.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Are you using a bioactive style setup, or you have planted vivariums that you keep your stuff in?
Yeah, I mostly try to go all natural. I was always a big fan of that. It looks better. It's I think there's better enrichment for the animals. But I'll tell you, man, too, and especially with these new cows and that MRP, they crap a ton. And so if you're
Yeah.
not bioactive, man, you're in there every day. You're a professional pooper scooper.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. With the enrichment, it's my biggest pet peeve. I don't want to say pet peeve because I really try, not to be biased. Like, one of the things with
Mhm.
this podcast is I want everyone to feel welcome. I want everyone to be able to learn, and I don't want anyone to feel that they're being judged, right? I
Mhm.
just want a source of education, knowledge, information. But there's clearly a difference in keeping an animal in an environment that's more like its natural environment, right?
Yeah.
Like, animals evolved over a very long period of time to a specific ecosystem, to a specific style of forest, right? Like,
Mhm.
you're never going to fully appreciate or be able to observe your animal in its true form unless you give it a piece of its environment. Like, it needs that, in my opinion. And again, I'm not
Mhm.
judging anyone that does the paper towel tube and
Mhm.
shoebox thing. I keep hatchlings and stuff like that, so I can't really say
Yeah.
anything. I use them
Absolutely.
for particular, in particular, for very specific situations, and it works out great.
Absolutely.
So, what do your feeders? Are you
Mhm.
feeding? Are you feeding? Are they big bug eaters?
You know what? I think like some of the other Rhacodactylus or New Caledonians, when you provide them with MRP, they aren't as crazy about bugs. I think Rhacodactylus in general, or some of my Gargs eat bugs, some of my leeches eat bugs. Um, yeah, the trackies, they'll eat them too. I definitely make sure and supply them, but they'll crush the bowl of MRP in like the first night. So
Yeah,
I think when you're looking at some of the other new cows, the Chihuahua for sure, but the Saracenorum, the Ciliatus, I mean those guys, those crush bugs.
yeah. I love my Saras too. I love.
Dude, they're great. They're so. It always surprises me how big they hatch out too.
Uh, they're so underrated.
Hmm.
I can't figure it out. I guess it's the whole morph thing, right? Like, crested geckos are so popular, and I look at some of the other New Caledonian species, and I'm like, man, like, they're really different, and
Hmm.
they're just as easily accessible. I mean, you got 40 crested geckos. I mean, check one of these out, man. Pick
Hmm.
up a Sarah or something, man. These things are I think they're great animals. They're great animals. Are you working with that? Are you working with them?
Yeah,
You are.
absolutely. And they're a favorite of mine. I think
Mm.
outside of the trackies and the
So
the
what
Gargs,
are you working
Sarahs are
with? You know what?
probably
What
right
else
up
you
there.
working with? Mm.
Whew, okay. Couple different species of Urodactylodes. Also from New Cal, obviously. Let me see. Day geckos have been a lifelong favorite. So actually, a couple
Awesome.
years ago, managed to pick up a couple of wild imported standing eye. Which again, talk about endangered. Talk about those don't get imported. There
Mm.
was a pet store down in Texas, and I heard about it and said, "I yes." So a couple
Awesome.
other species like Cepediana and Clemeri, Tokays. The Australian stuff has been some of my favorite though for a long time, and I'm terrible with Latin, and I'm sure there's somebody that's already
Oh
listening to me
my.
talk and saying he totally screwed that up. He doesn't know what he's
I,
talking
I
about.
have, you can't be worse than me. I promise you.
But
I can barely speak English.
the velvet geckos from Australia. Have you ever seen those?
I have. I have. I
Love
love them.
those.
I love them.
So I don't know if it's Edura or Oedura, but
Oeadura. Well, my
yeah,
buddy Wally Kern from Supreme
yeah.
Geckos has, I think he works with 3 or 4 different ones, but my podcast partner Jason on the other podcast, he has them. A bunch of people I'm super close with have them, and I
Hmm.
think they're super cool animals. Super cool.
Yeah, they're great. They're like the perfect size gecko. They're pretty. They're handleable. You know, I think people really kind of struggle to breed those, and they need cooling. They need that brumation, or you're not going to get squat from those guys, and
Yeah.
that's scary to shut things down and not feed an animal for 2 or 3 months plus. And
It really is. We were just talking to one of my buddies, Landon. He has just about every Strophaurus that's in the hobby. He
Mhm.
has like all these geckos. He was telling me some of the temperatures. He's got them for like, I don't know, like what he said, almost 60 days or something out, like close to 40-ish degrees, low 50. I'm like, I not no food, lights on for a couple hours. I no way in hell. No way in hell am I spending that much money and shutting my animals down like that. I couldn't do it.
There's some Aussie leaf tails that simply won't breed without that. I don't know how people do that without basements because I've got a basement. I'm here in the Northeast, so
Mhm.
it's pretty simple. I mean, the basement stays cool. It'll get down to the
Yeah.
50s plus, but if you don't do that stuff, you don't get those Wyberba, the Celebrosis are
Mhm.
probably a little bit easier, but some of those guys just they'll skunk you.
Yeah, we just did an episode. We just had Phil on Tremper.
Yeah,
We were talking to him about him, and he was telling me, and I'm like, there's no, I would have to be like hyper focused on just that species in order to accommodate them.
you
It's
never get comfortable. It's never a
yeah,
fun time of year when you're like, all right, I got to cool these guys down because
yeah.
I'm 3 months checking them every single day, just like, please don't be dead.
Oh man. So do you have a favorite? I mean, at one location, like maybe not just New Caledonia, but out of all of them, what's day geckos, right? You would say if you've been working with them for a long time, probably your favorite.
They're definitely a visual favorite. I think my my all-time favorite is probably Oidura Castelnaui. Again, just a beautiful velvet gecko, northern velvet geckos. Um, Coleonyx elegans, love Coleonyx. I mean,
Mhm.
again, those are like a childhood favorite.
Well,
And then, oh shoot, yeah, your Dactylodes symmetricus. That's
really?
something I never used to be able to find a picture of, let alone think that I'd be breeding them. So,
That's awesome. That's
yeah.
awesome. That's great, man. That really is cool to hear that, when people are living childhood dreams or when they see something and they think is impossible at one time and then it's their reality. I mean that's great. These animals bring people so much
Mhm.
joy and fulfill so many dreams that it's just it's beautiful, there's no other way to
Yeah.
say it. It's a beautiful thing.
As a
Well,
kid, I just remember always rushing to the bookstore, the book section in the pet store, and just trying to find a new gecko book. And I've got all of like Dick Bartlett's books, and I remember seeing pictures of some of these things. I'm like, I've never seen this before. This is
yeah.
wild. I'm never going to have this. And then I'm
Mhm.
breeding some of those things, and it's been just a wild dream come true just to be able to work with some of these animals, see their behavior, and I know you were complimentary of my Instagram channel. I
Yeah.
love photography now. That's become a huge just hobby within the hobby. Just photographing the eyes. Huge. Obviously, the gecko eyes come in all different shapes, colors, you name it.
Amazing. Amazing. Probably the craziest, most diverse, beautiful eyes in the animal kingdom if you think about it, right? If you take
Absolutely.
geckos in general and look at their eyes, it's insane. Me and Jason had talked about making a calendar. We were going to do a calendar with just gecko eyes,
Oh yeah.
give them out for the podcast. But we haven't obviously started on that yet. But it's something we're going to do. I mean, they're beautiful, beautiful. So back to say, I knew this was going to happen too. When I look at your animals, I'm going to go all over the place and totally like get off track of the rough snouts. So kind of back to breeding them and
Hmm.
pairing them. How
Yep.
can we talk about that a little bit? How do
Yeah.
you introduce them? Are they picky, like maybe a Leachianus? Do they? So walk us through the whole pairing and breeding process, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things with these species, these rough snouts, this is both Trachycephalus and Trachyrhynchus. I mean, they're long-lived geckos. It takes a good 3+ years for them to mature, right?
Of
So,
course.
um, obviously, there's that waiting game, making sure that they're the proper weight, proper size, and then with all Rhacodactylus, they're true lizard eaters, right?
Hmm.
So you want to be cognizant of the size and make sure that they're both similar sort of size and maturity when you're doing this. Not sure if I've gotten lucky or if this is just the both species, but so far with introductions, there hasn't been any sort of squabbling
Okay.
or fighting. Uh,
That's good then.
not to say that it can't happen, but usually
Yeah.
when I'm seeing fights or aggression, it's unfortunately parent on child violence there, and
Yeah.
but no, they've been pretty gentle with each other, which is kind of nice to see. And again, I keep them in pairs, not trios. So maybe there
Okay.
are some breeders that see different behaviors within trios. I'd be curious to know
Yeah.
if other folks have seen that. But kind of the funny part is you're again, there's a long gestation period for these animals. So once they do successfully mate, you're probably looking at August to October being the most common times that litters are born, but you can get surprise litters any time of the year. So you got to stay vigilant. And I mean, like, when you're getting close, you got to be checking that bamboo or that cork hollow daily.
How are they usually laying two? What do you call them? Like, what do you call a live bearing baby? Just a neonate? What are they?
Yeah, yeah, just a neonate.
How many? How many? Usually two.
Two if you're lucky, and that's kind of
Okay.
the hard thing. Just like the other New Caledonians, even though they're live bearing, they can still have infertile ova, right? So you
Oh.
could get one good healthy neonate. You could get a slug, just like you get infertile eggs from the egg layers. You may just have them take a season off. So I've got my one pair that unfortunately I found the babies a little bit too late this year, and then my second pair. I don't know if I got skunked or if I just wasn't as vigilant as checking the tubes, but so this year I didn't produce any. So, or last year rather. So hopefully this year is a little bit better.
Yeah, that's so like just I hate to say it, but I mean, but it's just a thought. It's just odd, right? Because I feel like nature
Hmm.
doesn't do anything by accident. I feel like nature is very strategic in the things that it does, and it's just odd that the mother would eat. There's other species like tokays and
Hmm.
things that actually like help them and raise them, protect them. That an animal like that would eat its young after such a long gestation period, and the
Hmm.
whole process. It just seems so. Damn, that's rough. That's a rough one.
Yeah, yeah, but again, you see that with the true Rhacodactylus, right? They're all
Yeah,
lizard eaters, and so speaking of captivity versus the wild, they've got a chance to get away in the wild.
yeah,
It's part of the
yeah.
reason why these animals are so skittish is they share, tree hollows with
Hmm.
Leachianus. They share tree hollows with their own species, and those are all lizard eaters. So there's a reason why they're flighty. So,
Yeah,
I talked a little bit about that behavior, but they're very quick geckos, a lot quicker than Saracenorum. I know those get kind of a reputation for being quick. Those are puppy dogs, but
yeah.
the Trachycephalus especially are very flighty. Inside and outside of the cage. Like a lot of gecko species, you work with them and they calm down, but they
Mm.
definitely have the chance to escape in the wild. Whereas here in captivity, those tree hollows or cork tubes that they're seeking shelter in, that's where mom and dad live, and they have
Yeah,
nowhere to
yeah,
escape. So
yeah,
that's definitely hands down the hardest part about breeding these guys is
yeah.
making sure that you're being vigilant and watching for those babies.
So once they have laid their or given birth,
Hmm.
what do you take any special precautions? What do you do with the babies? How do you house the babies, the offspring? What are you doing with them?
Yeah, with those guys, it's nothing too crazy. It's honestly very similar to how I've, kept other New Caledonian hatchlings. Probably a small critter keeper or, sweater box, and making sure that you're misting them, providing food. They do like, cork tubes or tight places to feel secure. I haven't seen it really impact the baby's diets the way you may see with a Leachianus baby
Mhm.
that feels, exposed and not secure. But it's funny because they curl right up. So I kept a couple of plants in as I was raising out my initial Trachycephalus, and love to just wrap themselves around the base of the plant within the pot, and sometimes even over the cork tubes.
That's cool. That's awesome. So,
Yeah.
what exactly? How do I say this? What would be if someone were to be lucky enough? See, it's hard to even ask
Hmm.
this question with this species because it's not like something you can just stumble across and get, right? Like you're not. This has to be a thought out plan. You're saving a whole bunch of money, like just a very limited group of people that are working with these things. But
Yeah.
what would you suggest if someone was going to could by any means get their hands on a baby, let alone a
Hmm.
pair? What's one piece of advice that you would give them to succeed?
um, Saving and planning, which people in our hobby aren't always great at. But so I'm going to be honest. I just described how hard it is, even when you have a successful
Yeah.
breeding pair, to get one or two babies in a season.
Mm,
A lot of the times, it's outside of your control. So if you think about just the small group of folks that do keep and breed these animals regularly, again, it's a very limited quantity that go into the pet trade each year.
mm,
So my advice is, if this is something you're serious about, find somebody, but also make sure that you're ready to pull the trigger, if and when they have success with their animals, because there's a lot of really big collectors out there that, won't hesitate to be like, yep, here it is. I'm going to Venmo you right now. There isn't a whole lot of room for negotiation. So it's like, okay, if you're serious about
yeah.
this, save your money, make contact, and be ready to go.
Yeah. Hey, I listen. I couldn't say it any better. That's exactly what I would expect someone to say. If someone, have you sold them? Have you sold babies?
Oh
Do
yeah,
you
yeah.
do any
That's
type of vetting, or do you just assume that someone's paying that much money, they know exactly what they're doing? Do you ask
there's
it?
there is a little bit of vetting. Kind of the nice thing is the price tag also does a little bit
Yeah,
of the vetting process for me.
yeah,
But there have been a couple of friends specifically that I know really well.
yeah,
Andrew, a good friend of mine down in Texas, he's the one that told me about the standing eye that came into his buddy's shop. John Asher, who breeds a lot of anoles down in Florida, so I knew he can
yeah,
keep some fragile, quick animals and knows what he's doing. But and then Tom Wood, he and I will send stuff back and forth to each other all the time. So far,
yeah,
it's been just folks that I know what they're doing. But
yeah, yeah.
the
I
nice
think
thing.
that's a beautiful part of that dealing with animals of that caliber.
Hmm.
Because seems like it's like a lot of trials to get there, right? Like you have to make it through hell to get one of these things successfully, and it's a lot of work, man. I give you a lot of
Yeah.
credit, man. I really, really do. It's not. It's a lot more complicated than I thought. I'll say that because
Hmm.
you just taught me all of this, right? Like I've never gotten to. I've just everything I've heard about them has been word of mouth. I've never got to sit down with someone that's actually kept laters, like lessers or graders, let alone both of them, right? Like so to
Yeah.
hear these things, it's made them more elite in my book of animals, right? Like it's like they are. I mean that's I don't know. I'm like I'm literally speechless. Like they're like I'm like what do you? I don't even know what to say. I don't. I'm
Yeah.
not so sure that. I mean, you spend that much money and then think about finding another one and breeding them, and you may not even get to get them or keep them, or like
Yeah. Well, and
wow,
I'll tell you, I was talking to Tom Wood about this because again, he's right here in town, so I chat with him about geckos all the time. And
yeah,
before I got graders, I had my two pair of lessers, and I'm like, all right, so is there really that big a difference? They're just a little bit bigger. He goes, no, totally different personality, different behavior, and now that I've had them for a couple of years, I see what he's talking about.
hmm,
Just the graders, I got to tell you, are just the coolest freaking things.
really,
Yeah.
really. Well, what makes them what about them? What
Again,
makes
just
them?
the intelligence. They'll recognize you. I mean, these days I don't mess with my lessers very much because, like I said before, you see a little bit more of that defensive behavior. And listen, I don't want to stress them out. I definitely don't
Yeah,
want to get bit by them, and it's just not fun. And then the graders never had that worry. So but always been a lot calm, a lot easier to photograph too. They're just a little bit less squirrely because you know, typically they're pretty calm by comparison, but the Trachycephalus, I feel like I got to keep my head on a swivel. You go to lift up the camera and it's like, okay, where did it go? So
yeah, yeah. So when you're what do you weigh like other New Caledonian geckos? Does when you're getting ready to pair them, do you, I know
Mhm.
you had mentioned make sure the weight is correct, but is there a target weight, a target age? Like what do you look for with them? How big do they get as far as grams go? How much would an adult female be weigh?
You know what? I haven't weighed my animals a ton. When I'm talking about like pairing and making sure that they're mature,
Yeah,
a lot of times I'm talking to the breeders, making sure that I'm not rushing the breeding process. I'll be honest, the first time I bred Chihuahua, I definitely rushed it a little bit, and it's
really.
like, don't want to do that again. And those poor geckos go through hell when they're
Mm.
producing eggs. Um, but no, I mean, keeping the adult animals, I don't weigh them often. I unless I
I
was going to
don't
sell
either.
them, but even then.
I don't either. That's why it's like a hard question for me to ask because I have
Mhm.
12 breeding pairs of Chihuahuas, and I, a bunch of babies, and people ask me questions with weight like everything's a crested gecko. But
Mhm.
I get it from my standpoint, it's good for reference. Like when I'm explaining to
Sure.
someone, they weigh this much, but I don't weigh my animals either. If someone were to ask how much any of my Chihuahuas weigh, I couldn't tell you. When I
Yeah.
pair them, I'm a little strange because I mean, people when their horror stories have put the fear of God in me. So I typically wait till my animals are like 3 years old. Like
Oh yeah.
yeah, I do. And I just feel that there's a look that comes with a mature Chihuahua. Like I can
Mhm.
look at one and be like, okay, I don't need to really put you on a scale or
Mhm.
even know there's just I don't know how to explain it, but there's a look. You can tell when an animal is stout, when an animal is like ready.
Oh yeah.
And I'd imagine these guys are kind of the same, but what can you, as far as for the listeners, I'm just trying
Mhm.
to get a size reference. Like, how big do they act? Do they have graders? How big do both of each of them get individually?
Yeah, so my lessers are probably about the size of a adult Chihuahua.
Okay.
My graders are not quite full grown yet. Again, they're only about 2.5 years, so
Yeah.
I'd expect that 4 or 5 years in, we'll see their size, but probably the size of an island locale Lichianus, I would assume, just based on what I'm hearing. And again, there may be
Wow.
some people listening to this saying, "Ah, I'm not that big." Well, I'll tell you what, man, and I wish I still had this. Had this auriculatus Ridley 120 gram gargoyle gecko, and
I've heard
you know
stories.
yeah, he really didn't hit his growth spurt until about 5 years in, and that's a gargoyle gecko. So a lot of these guys, yeah, they can breed 3 and 4 years, but they're going to keep growing until probably 5 plus.
I agree 100%. I feel like with these animals, where they're documented, I talked to Paul Morlock. I had him
Hmm.
on the show, and he was telling me about an animal he has. It's like 40 years old. Now, if
Wow.
an animal lives that long, right?
Hmm.
Like you're not in my opinion, just because they can have birth, right? Mammals
Hmm.
can ovulate in a much younger age than they should be
Yeah.
giving birth to, right?
Yeah.
Humans, dogs, cats, and these mammals doesn't mean that you're ready to start reproducing.
Hmm.
So I feel like with these animals, a lot of people are rushing it, right? Like you should
Definitely.
probably be waiting a little longer for these animals to grow. I just I don't think I like you said. I think a lot more species than just these rough snouts and chihuahuas. I think that they that's probably the prime age around 5 years old. Between
Hmm.
4 and 5 years old is when an animal is probably mature enough to start reproducing healthy. You know,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, especially for those long-lived species like the New Caledonians, for sure.
yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean it's right. I've talked to people that have 20-year-old crested geckos.
Yeah.
So it's probably something that's I don't know what the scientific terms, but if all those animals from that island are living 20 plus years, right? Like
Hmm.
it's something. There's something there. There's something to it. And if they're
Hmm.
living that long, they're not maturing that fast, right? Like
Right.
it just doesn't make sense. It's it's interesting. It's cool to see that other people kind of notice the same thing, because I hear
Hmm.
people are like, oh, yeah, I got them up to breed and weight, talking about crested geckos, but I got them up to breed and weight in 18 months. Like, what? Since when is like weight a breeding thing?
Yeah.
Eh, that's interesting. It is what it is. So what do you? How long have you been vending for?
Oh, probably since 2006. So my day job is sales. So when you have a bunch of and it starts out with, hey, I got a couple of crested geckos and I'm hatching the eggs. Now what do I do with it? It was kind of a natural transition. I guess I'm going to go sell. I guess I'm going to go vend at an expo. So used to do that. Geez, I think 2007 or 8 was probably my first year doing that. And
Very
been doing it
cool.
ever since. And it was fun because my buddy Matt and I and a couple other folks, used to vend next to each other at these expos and say, you know, this is kind of marketed wrong, right? We're sitting there where the people aren't coming through, and if they are, they're not coming through to buy. They're coming through to hold a gecko and just kind of turning into a petting zoo. And so we talked for years about, hey, if we did a show, this is how we would do it. This is how we would market it, and that led to us working together and starting a show here in Rochester, New York, called Rexpo that I referenced at the beginning of the show.
That is damn cool.
Well, it's funny. We were like, okay, diversity of animals, market it as hey, come here to buy, because if you keep your vendors happy, you got a great show,
Yeah,
and you keep them happy by you know number one, bringing in a crowd that wants to do more than just look. But again, if you're
absolutely.
looking at diversity, right, the crowd's going to find something. Like I still occasionally go to a show and say, "Holy crap, what is that?" And that's an awesome feeling. Kind of brings you back to being a kid too, and just opening a book or going to the pet
Tell
shop
people
and
all
saying,
the
"I have
time.
no idea."
It's nothing better than walking into a reptile show and being able to get to a table and not know what something is.
Yeah.
I live for that. You go to some of these shows and I hate to say it because I keep them. I keep New Caledonian stuff, but it's literally ball python after crested gecko after
hmm
ball python after crested gecko, and it's like,
I love
dude,
going to those wild caught tables because those are gems now. I
yeah,
know people have certain feelings about wholesalers and
yeah,
wild caught, but like that's new blood. That's a species of gecko that someone probably hasn't really dedicated time to anymore.
yeah.
Like those are the gems. Those are when Madagascar closes down, when Southeast Asia stop exporting, people are going to be sorry that they didn't get that ugly brown gecko on that table that they had no idea what it was.
Yeah, you're
You
absolutely
know.
right. You're absolutely right. And there is a line, right? Like there's some
hmm
people that see it that way. A lot of people see it that way. And there's other people that will look at us like we're the devil, like we're just supporting poaching and all types of crap.
hmm
And it's not that. It's literally like you said, these places. I mean, if you look at some of these other countries that have already shut down, like
hmm
they're going to stop exporting their animals. And it's good for them.
hmm
I damn near pray every day, and I keep a bunch of Madagascar species. Shut it down! Shut it down! You're sucking this island dry.
hmm
If you care about these animals, you will want your grandchildren to be able to see them in their natural environment someday,
hmm
and it's not going to happen with them doing what they're doing right now. You
Yeah.
know, it,
It's
it,
sad. It's almost like strip mining. You wish they would take more of an ecotourism sort of approach, but
they'd kill it. They'd make so much more money. My boss is going to Belize in a couple days. He's going to
oh
Belize.
yeah.
He spends all this money traveling to these places that quite literally have done just that. They have taken their jungles and their rainforests and they turn them into these little. He does a lot of destination fishing and a lot of
hmm
like these tours. Like he's going to Belize to go sleep in a jungle in a house with his wife, and they go out at nighttime and he's going
hmm
herping. He doesn't like reptiles the way I do, but he's going out to go on a frog tour. They go out at nighttime, and he's literally today was looking for a special flashlight to buy because he's going out at night and they're going to go find X kind of frog. I'm like, and you know how much money they're paying to go on this trip? A lot more than
yeah.
they're going to get for that one tree they cut down and turn into paper pulp. I promise you. Nope.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great place to go for frogs too. But yeah, I mean, Frank Colachico, if you haven't had him on before, he's a great dude to talk to. But
We talked to him. We're going to get him. He started
nice.
scheduling him. Yeah, Frank's the man.
He's a busy guy, but I'll
Oh
remember
God.
2019. I vended over at Tinley, NARBC Tinley, and he gave this great talk on the first night. It was a gecko symposium, and he's talking about, you guys are about to spend $1,000 on a gecko tomorrow. Instead of doing that, buy a
buy
plane ticket and go
tickets.
see where they're from.
Right.
And I'm like, that's super inspiring, but fuck, I'm not going to make any money tomorrow. This, that hurt.
Yeah.
But no, he's the man.
It's I mean, you've obviously watched some of his videos in
Oh
Australia
yeah.
and stuff. I mean, in wherever he went looking for the where the hell was he in the Middle East somewhere? Arman.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
It's super inspiring. It's super inspiring, and that's the truth. You know, I personally, you know, I grew up catching everything that crawled, right? Like that's what it
Hmm.
was. When I was a kid, there was no video games. You go outside, you play, you catch anything that's like
Yeah.
you just lived a little bit different, right?
And where was that?
I'm from Connecticut. I grew up right
Yeah.
here in between Westchester County, New York, and Lower Connecticut. But it's what we did, right? So
Hmm.
animals to me aren't like I didn't grow up and like just get introduced to animals and have it be this aha thing. Like I was introduced to reptiles in their natural environment. That's where I
Hmm.
love seeing them. That's where
Oh yeah.
I I want to see them. So when I started keeping reptiles and that weren't native reptiles, and unfortunately I did as a kid. I did. I kept native reptiles. You know, I know
Hmm.
people frown upon it, but when you're a kid and you catch a snake that's super cool, you sneak it into your house, you put it in a little tank in your room, hope your mom and dad don't see it, and then you have a
Yeah.
pet, right?
80s
So
and 90s were a different time, man.
yeah. So I got a little older, and to make a long story short and a short story shorter, we would get animals and build their enclosures
Hmm.
to match whatever information we could find in a National Geographic or Encyclopedia Britannica, because there was no books or internet or stuff like that. So we
Yeah.
would literally say, oh, okay, this animal comes from here. Say ball python, for example, because I had those as a kid.
Hmm.
You get a ball python from the pet shop, and they were big things back then. So they come from this part of Africa. We would look in the book, and we would try to make that environment in a tank, and we would almost envision ourselves being there, right? Like, wow,
Hmm.
we're in Africa. Like I took a little chunk of this environment and put it in my house. Like that was part of the whole thing, was recreating that animal's natural environment and dreaming of being there one day, actually seeing the animal. It sounds a little weird, but I mean, as a kid, that's what it was all about, right?
Yeah,
Like, you
absolutely.
know, I wanted to be Indiana Jones. I wanted to be Jacques Cousteau. Like these are like yeah.
No,
It's times are different, and technology has clearly helped, right? Like you
yeah.
know, with getting information and gathering information and
But you know what the
ease
worst
of
part about
sharing.
that is? So that information is all out there and it can be easy to find. You can't really validate if it's good
Yeah,
information or not. I miss reptile books. Honestly, it's a shame that they're not really produced the way they used to be. And every time I see a good one come out, I make sure to snatch it up. I don't know about you. You've been doing this a long time too. You ever get that herp burnout feeling?
no,
No. Oh man, I'll tell you. So it happened to me twice. So once breeding Europlatus fantasticus, super prolific animals. They're heartbreakers because if you're keeping
I
them
hear.
wrong, they'll die. So I lost a couple of adults. I produced 24 babies one year. That just makes you want to sell every animal in your collection. It just absolutely breaks your heart when you love these animals. But there are other times that I got burnt out too, and the reason why I bring it up is it's a natural cycle. I've seen it with some other buddies of mine. But have you ever read Bill Love's book?
What's I don't I'd be lying to you if I said I have, but I'm not certain that I haven't. You know,
Great freaking book, and I'm giving the plug because when you're
right.
burnt out the way I had gotten, or some of my buddies, him talking about his story and his journey in the reptile world takes you back to why you love these things in the first place. Flipping over logs, going out looking for them, road cruising,
Tony, that's my
sending
life.
letters to folks. Yeah,
That's
that's the passion, right?
uh, that's why I don't mean to sound smug or saying that I haven't got burnt out. I have, unfortunately, I have questioned keeping certain species. You know,
Oh
like you
yeah.
just said, I had Fantasticus myself, and I lost one, and I questioned it. I'm like, am I should I not be doing this and just do what I know how I do what I do right? You know that I
Hmm.
should I just be stick to what I know how to do, because this I'm not so sure I want to keep doing this. But as far
Hmm.
as burnout, like tired of the animals, Tony, it's my happy place, man. I work construction. I deal with stress all day. I'm
Hmm.
married. I deal with a lot of stressful things, and some people would call those blessings. And I'm not saying that they're not, but my happy place is these animals. Like you said, every
Yeah.
time I hold one of these animals in my room, I remember being a kid without a care in the world. Every time, and if I ever allow myself to let that get tiring or stressful, then I just don't know. I don't know. I don't want to, really want to think about it, but I understand. I do understand. I understand monotony. I understand how a collection and taking care of that collection day in and day out can become monotonous to people. I get it, especially in the summertime if you're, got a lot of other things you want to do and a lot of other things going on, and things continuously and consecutively go wrong for you. I get it. I totally get it. It's so I know you have to go at 5 o'clock, and honestly I could talk to you till 5 tomorrow about your collection. I want to give you a couple minutes, if you have anything, to maybe promote about yourself, maybe some shows you're doing, some projects you're working on, your business, websites. The stage is yours. Anything you want to, you're a salesman, you know what to do.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, as far as shows, I'm pretty much Rexpo exclusive right now in Rochester, New York, but occasionally I'll make an appearance over at Tinley. And then this year, as far as projects I'm excited about, I've got some great GT Lichianis that I'm super stoked about. A couple of projects with Tom, the Lessers. Really, even crossing my fingers. We'll see how the graders look size wise. I'm not ready to kind of do that just yet. And then or no, not Strophaurus. Would love to get back into them. Nephurus stellatus, Diplodactylus galeatus, if that's even the species I have now, because they just did a little bit more taxonomic
Yeah, changes.
reclassification. But then also the velvets. So I don't know. Like I've got a whole bunch of variety of stuff, and my first F1 standing eye eggs in the incubator right now. So I'm pumped about a lot of
That's
different
awesome.
things.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah.
Got a lot of cool stuff going on, man. I mean, you're what you're doing. I mean, even through pictures, like your page is inspirational, right? Like the things that you post are super. They're just it's like an uplifting experience to scroll through your page. Like it's an awesome thing that you're doing. The animals you're working with, it's refreshing. There you go. It's very refreshing to look at the variety and diversity of things you're working with, and I mean, it's been an honor to talk to you. I'm sorry I was so all over the place, but I
No,
got your
dude, you're fine.
page right here. I'm looking at all these species. I'm thinking of all these other animals, and
Mhm.
where, oh man, it's just, where do you start? Like your collection is something people idolize. Like that's what I'd imagine people would consider the perfect collection, right? Like it's
Keep what you
geckos.
love. You got to keep what you love, right? And
That's
it's tough
it's
when you love them all. I'm trying to remind myself it's not Pokemon.
You're right. I started with, basically New Caledonia animals and kind of got that fever. And now I have, 16, 17 different species, 3, 4 different continents. Like it's a whole new world. I'm like, what was I doing? Like
Oh
what the
yeah.
hell was I doing? And it comes with some disappointment, though. It does. Like I said, with some of those leaf tails, man,
Oh yeah.
the Europlatus, I have been super successful with some, and then the others, I still can't wrap my head around, man, and I don't know what I did wrong. But we'll figure it out. Tony, it was a
Yeah.
pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It was a lot of fun. I'm glad we got a chance to nerd out and talk geckos together. It's always a good
Absolutely,
time. I'll let you know
absolutely,
if I make it to White Plains. I'm sure you'd be, right over there.
hell yeah. Oh, well, love it, love it. It's my childhood show. I tell people all the time. It does long story, but I've been going there since damn near the '80s. Whenever they started the show, I mean, 87, 90
Mhm.
ish. I've been going to that show. They used to have a reptile show and a gun show on the same weekend. Like it
Oh,
was,
there you go.
yeah. My father, I grew up. Long story, but I grew like I said, I was born into reptiles. I had no choice but to love these things. But yeah, man, total blast nerding out what you do. I again respect and love what you're doing. For anyone that didn't hear me, check Tony's page out. Roc Geckos on Instagram. Incredible animals. Where do you sell? Do you sell on Morph Market? Do you have the animals up for? Are you offering
Yeah,
animals? Where
I
can
sell on
someone?
Morph Market, and usually I'll post a couple of things up on Instagram occasionally too. You know, obviously gotta watch the terms and conditions there for not selling animals on Meta platforms. But yeah, Morph Market is probably the primary. Every once in a while, Fauna Classifieds. So
All right, so get hip, guys. Quality animals, incredible stuff. Check them out. All right, I'll catch you on the next episode, guys. Behave yourselves. Take care of your damn animals. All right.